everybody, and welcome to this In Conversation. My name's Suzy Dean. I'm the Chief Executive at AddIn365, and AddIn365 are a Microsoft Charter partner that specialise in SharePoint, Teams, Viva and OneDrive. I'm really thrilled that today on our panel we have the Jeff Teper.
With the Suzy Dean.
I know. And Jeff needs very little introduction. He's been at Microsoft for 30 years and oversees product engineering, marketing for SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Viva, and based on this morning's keynote, Loop, Syntex, the list goes on and on. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Andreea. Andreea is from an organisation called Origin that does Agrii farm technology. And Andreea is going to be joining us to talk about their Viva journey with us. And we have Richard Gifford. Richard has been a CIO for a long, long time at Carillion, Wincanton, and most recently Ordnance Survey. And Ordnance Survey are the mapping agency for the UK. He's delivered Viva connections, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint at Wincanton, and he's about to embark on the same journey again at Ordnance Survey, so we're going to hear from him as well. So before we get going, Jeff, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your keynote this morning.
Okay.
And what I found as a partner is that every now and again there's something that captures the zeitgeist out in the customer world, and places has been top of conversation with a lot of organisations we work with. So can you tell us a little bit in summary about what Places is, and then tell us a little bit about what we can expect when?
Yeah, so we've obviously helped people with remote distributed work with Teams, and in particular Teams rooms. And as we heard from organizations, they were going to be, most organizations, if it's feasible for their workforce, we're going to be a lot more flexible about where people worked and when people worked. They came to us and said, hey, we've got these challenges, we want to make the most of our in-person space, we want people to know when they can, people want to come into the office when there's others in the office, and scheduling meetings, not knowing where people are, we need better tools for that. And so building on Teams and Teams rooms, we're introducing Microsoft Places that lets you help you manage and understand your workforce and your physical and virtual meeting spaces and make it easier to manage them.
Yeah. Our clients are particularly excited about Places because many of them have buildings with 20 or 30 floors, so actually knowing that you only have to open 7 of those based on the number of people coming in. So there's been a big economic driver for that technology. So what can we expect when?
Yeah, we're shared that next year we'll be rolling out the broader preview and release. It's a new version, so we'll get some feedback. If it's ready for release, we'll release it quickly. But to your point, besides the employee engagement side of it, there's a real economic side that's pretty critical in this environment where people want to manage their real estate more effectively.
Thank you for that. And I think you touched on something at the end of your keynote this morning. We sort of talked about the macro transformation based tools like Syntex, that can really revolutionize how an organization interacts with its own content and data. And then we also talked about micro transformation tools like Loop, which is that day-to-day improvement, that enhancement that can save people a lot of time. Is that how you're thinking about productivity now, macro and micro transformation?
Yeah, that's a really good framing. That we have a base set of collaboration capabilities. People are familiar with Office and OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams, and now Loop is a real innovation, breaking down the barriers between conversations and content for those sort of quick productivity, micro collaboration that is really the core of a lot of work. And so we have a set of investments there, making that more simple and engaging. But then, companies have come to us with these sort of bigger, broader needs, engaging your employees and transforming your processes. And that's where the big investments we're making with Viva for employee engagement and Syntex for these content processes comes in. So yeah, great way to frame it, Suzy, that we're both focused on the simple day-to-day and make that more fluid and easy, but also the big initiatives companies have.
I think it's incredibly important, and we're going to hear more from our speakers on this, because an organisation, there is an extent to which things have to be done in a certain order.
Right.
I mean, you can't really take advantage of Syntax until you've got your documents in the online world,
right.
and but with the micro improvements that can be made with things like Loop, you can instantly feel the benefit of that innovation without necessarily needing to wait for 5 other things to happen before it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Our goal is our products fit together very neatly, but you don't have to do everything all at once. Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about Viva. Of course, there's Viva Sales, Viva Connections, Viva Learning. There's an enormous Viva suite now. How can we best understand that relationship between the Viva suite and perhaps what we might think of as core services like SharePoint and Teams? Earlier in your presentation this morning, you sort of showed SharePoint underpinning a lot now.
Yeah, for the things that are content-centric, like Viva Topics and Connections, SharePoint's the underpinning of it. We decided to put a lot of these things under the Viva brand, and you've seen us introduce new things like the Glint acquisition that we did a while ago. People told us that was very relevant to Viva. We did an Ally acquisition that became Viva Goals. And so there's a common theme of how this family can help employees learn, grow their skills, share knowledge, stay up to date with information, and but it builds on what you have. So you could go to Viva Connections and immediately see the news from SharePoint, the conversations from Yammer, the all hands videos from Stream, all in that place. So it's not an orthogonal investment, it builds on those things.
I love the use case based approach because it's allowed us to look at different parts of an organisation, and there's something for everybody there to really build on that foundational SharePoint layer. Whether it's OKRs with the strategy team, Viva Learning with the HR team, there's really a huge amount to it, and it's simple to understand, and I think that really that's really improved things.
Yeah, and one of the other things we really set out with the goal of Viva Connections is historically SharePoint had mostly been used for information workers, people creating Word, Excel, PowerPoint spreadsheets and so forth. But there's a lot more people in the workforce than that. In fact, the vast majority of the workforce in the world is not actually building Excel spreadsheets. We love those who do, that's a growing community, but the people who are engaging with customers, partners, clients, patients, all the people involved in a healthcare system, we really designed Viva Connections to be this streamlined mobile experience that builds on all that, but you didn't have to be an Excel or PowerPoint user for it to be relevant. In fact, we took the chance to make it even simpler than some of our previous work.
And I'm so thrilled that Andreea and Richard have managed to take advantage of Viva Connections in their organisations. Andreea, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you came to end up rolling out Viva Connections for your employees. Who were they? Why did you end up using it?
So I think it is worth mentioning that when we came to you, we started with an absolute blank piece of paper and with a lot of challenges.
Yes.
Obviously. So we knew we had a set of requirements that will need to be met in order to make our main audience, the agronomists, happy about using this new technology that we were putting in front of them. And I think it's worth giving a bit of a backstory to the agronomists here, because it's a wide name that we are associating with a group, about 200 people are in our company. So they are what we like to present as crop doctors. They are the people that engage with our customers, which are farmers, go on visit every field that the customers grow crops on. They assess the health of the crops. They make certain decisions based on a variation of data points, and then they build prescriptions on the back of that of what products our customers need to use. Now, in order to do all of that, you either need to be a dictionary of information when it comes to everything regarding the products, the pricing, and all of the data variants that you have, or have very easy access to a very large set of information.
And how much information was there? just to give listeners a feel?
The lovely number of documents that we previously posted on SharePoint on-premise was 100,000 individual documents. And we're talking here PDFs, PowerPoints, Word documents, and then separately all of the newsletters and everything else that
and they were changing all the time as well, because of course what you might recommend for a certain soil type in 2022 could be totally different in 2023. So it's not just a huge base of content, it's a growing base of content as well.
And the legislation also changes all the time. And this is a main driver in all of the decision making for our customers.
So how and where do the agronomists work?
Well, the agronomists work mainly in the field. So you can imagine one guy driving from field to field, walking the actual crops in order to make the assessments.
Yeah.
So when we think about technology, they are mostly mobile based.
Yeah.
They work in their cars or in the actual field while they are assessing the issues.
So why was Viva Connections the right choice for them?
Well, from straight away when we came to you, we said we need a solution that's going to work and be very responsive to mobile. And that's when we came to Viva Connections and what opportunity and what flexibility these would offer for our agronomists.
Yeah. And Agrii have made use of the Viva Connections dashboard tiles specifically, alongside things like the SharePoint navigation and that universal feed. Richard, while you were the CIO at Wincanton, it was a much more deliberate, known upfront move to make use of Viva Connections for your 15,000 warehouse workers and lorry drivers, wasn't it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we embarked already on replacing some legacy intranet, so we were somewhat down the route already. The challenge, though, was to engage with the workforce. Jeff, as you were saying, the vast majority of our organisation, we're away from head office, they're off the network, they were remote workers, and what we wanted to do was engage with them and promote the culture and making sure that communications really were a kind of two-way thing. So that's where we then started embarking down this route of the whole mobile piece, so that as we developed the website, the intranet, so too that we could deliver it to their mobile phones, to kiosks, and into the warehouse where they were working. And it's absolutely key because these guys are measured on their productivity, and it's important that we're using their time in a really efficient way. So that worked really well for us.
So Jeff, where would you recommend somebody begins their Viva journey? There are a lot of available capabilities now as part of that family. Are some logically prior to others? Would you recommend there's some foundations in place?
Yeah, I think there's multiple on-ramps. You don't have to follow a specific sequence. In fact, there may be people who say, we want to have a larger intranet strategy with Viva Connections, but it's going to take us a little time to figure that out. But boy, what we really need right now is employee surveys or OKRs. We're ready to go there. Or education via Viva Learning. I think Viva Connections is probably the most foundational part of the suite. And we've designed it to work. If you have an existing set of SharePoint investments, great. You can just get going with that with Viva Connections. But we've also designed it, even if you haven't historically had SharePoint or even any intranet, so you can just, as get started with simple news and cards and so forth. So that's, if you ask me to pick one, I would say Viva Connections is the right starting point. But I also want to, if people have a specific need that's really pressing and they know they want to get going with something, it's totally fine to start with the end of the modules. There's no dead ends.
Yeah. It's funny, just this month I was approached by an organisation who had a critical requirement to bring some of their workday insights for the employee into the SharePoint ecosystem. And of course, Workday have got their Viva Connections dashboard tiles, so it was a very easy conversation to have. And for them, it was an HR driver, it wasn't the intranet, it was something else. But again, very easy to implement, very easy to deliver upon. Andreea, tell us a little bit about exactly how the Viva Connections dashboard tiles were used for these agronomists that spend so much time in the car, in the fields, with this enormous database of content that they potentially need to get through.
So Richard mentioned productivity, and that was the main driver in the implementation that we had as well, because we wanted to increase our agronomists' productivity while minimizing the time that they would spend looking for the information that they required in the vast collection of content that we had within the internet. So going from this, we have tried to identify the main, let's say, 5 pain points that they had while they were using the internet and while they were looking for the content. That brought us to, let's say, make a selection of solutions that we can put in front of them as a first starter, because I can say they're not necessarily the biggest fans of change. So we had to make sure that we introduce them to some tools that are very well put for their needs.
And you opted for an AddIn365 Viva Connections tile called Collections.
Yes.
What did Collections do for you? How did Collections work?
Now, Collections came in place when we were discussing about the way that our agronomists are using the documents. Now, I'm not ashamed to say majority of them still like to download the document, keep it in a folder in their computer, and use it offline. Now, with the mention of legislations from earlier, that would obviously be a major point of risk for us, because we need to make sure that everyone uses the latest version of the document. So with Collections, we enable them to actually be able to bookmark as well as organize those documents in the way they want in their own OneDrives. So still offering them the opportunity to do their own structure.
And that's the thing about context, isn't it? It was, I think sometimes, and this doesn't happen often, we hear organisations say all of our people are totally unique. And in the back of my head, I do a bit of an eye roll. I think you say that, but I'm sure when we talk to them, there's a lot of similarity between what one person to the next needs to do. But it was a shocking moment when we went and talked to some of the agronomists at Agrii, and they actually broke out in an argument between each other about how content would be used. And I came away from that somewhat horrified, and I said to our CTO, they actually all work completely differently. How are we going to find a solution for this? And Collections has been brilliant, hasn't it? Because it's allowed for that individual collecting of content, aggregating, sorting in a way that makes sense for the individual in order for them to use it. But you've also made use of the locations capability as well.
Yeah, so we have around 40 plus locations throughout the country. Those are main warehouses as well as offices.
Yeah.
And our workforce travels quite a lot, and they don't necessarily know all of the contacts to each of the locations or how to get to the places, because usually with agricultural warehouses they're quite remote in the countryside. So we've enabled them to actually be able to very easily access every location from their mobile, sending the information straight to Google Maps and being able to navigate very quickly to where they needed to get.
And how about job guides? Because that was another area that the Viva Connections dashboard became useful to your agronomists.
Yeah, so agriculture works on a season base. So depending in the time of the season you need a different set of data that you engage with. So with job guides, we somehow simplify the search that the agronomist has to make based on exactly the time of the season they're in, but also a set of initial variables that we have put together for them. This is also a very good use case for new agronomists that are joining the company and need guidance step by step in the first few years of their engagement with our customers.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear, and I'm really glad that we've been able to make life easier for your agronomists. And Richard, moving on to you, obviously, serious CIO here, but it's also not the first time that you've rolled out this particular set of capabilities to the employees that you're working with, albeit very, very different industries. What is it about Viva and SharePoint and Teams? What is it about that combination that just works for you?
I think kind of all boils down to simplicity and trust in the roadmap moving forward. So anchoring on that technology seems absolutely the right thing to do. At Ordnance Survey, they've already made quite significant investments in around SharePoint, but I would say in a non-architected way. So many SharePoint sites, but without that kind of vision. And I think recognising that's with AddIn's help, that's where we're going to get to pull all of that together and to use that technology to move forward in a cohesive way, I'd say.
And we heard from Andreea about how the dashboard has been used to support their first line workers, but of course you've rolled out experiences to your head office workers as well, albeit different in nature.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean there's two categories of workers. So the majority of people are now hybrid working. So we have got a splendid office, which at the moment is largely empty. We're encouraging people back, of course, but that community is largely catered for. But then we have some mobile people who are surveyors out in the field who equally need supporting. So it's a similar sort of feel, to previously and to what we were hearing just there as well. So again, by architecting this and pulling this together, we'll get an excellent solution.
It's interesting, Andreea, you talked about employee productivity and really wanting to get people as efficient as possible. And personally, I also think the dashboard tiles are excellent for productivity, helping people to do things they need to do. I know that some like it for things like news, so more communications based, and I kind of think that if it's right next to the universal feed, why do you need a tile for that? So Jeff, let me put you on the spot. Is Viva Connections, especially the dashboard tiles, more of a communications tool or a productivity tool in your mind?
I think it's a little bit more of a communications tool where you can see the news and information that's going on in your organization targeted to you. Clearly the cards offer some productivity to get to particular applications, but we've not designed it as a productivity starting point in the way, say, the Microsoft 365 app that's very centered on launching all the apps. Now that doesn't mean with customization like you all have done, you can't evolve it into a more comprehensive productivity solution. But our primary point is let's get you to the information and applications that are communicated out to you. But we don't want to put too many limits on it, but that's really the problem we've focused on.
And Andreea, for anyone that's watching who's about to embark on their own digital employee experience revamp, what sort of core tips would you give?
I would say focus on covering the main needs of your workforce. That was quite essential for us because as we have embarked the journey of rebuilding the digital workspace, we had a lot of different voices. If we would have chosen to actually ignore majority of them and just take a step back and say, we're just going to cherry pick a couple of things and deliver to the people that we think are most important, it wouldn't have been the success that it has been. So we actually decided to adapt to the needs, understanding that every individual in the agronomy team needed their needs met in order to increase the productivity. Secondly, I would say build the ecosystem of content. As an IT organization, don't stop at delivering the skeleton of the solution, but rather focus on actually delivering the content. Make that step, especially if you have a historical workspace as we had with SharePoint on-premise, where we already had this huge 100,000 documents collection that we had to actually move and put in a new architecture for them. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the business, being agriculture, they're not necessarily as technology focused, so that step definitely increased the engagement that we had from the beginning with the entire company. And then I would say look at the solutions that you are implementing holistically do not take the technologies on their own.
Yes.
Yeah. Try and build them under the same umbrella and bring them together and package them for the people to actually use. Depending again on the industry in which you work, the adoption varies a lot. So if you package them and put a story behind how all of them should be used as a whole, it's going to be a lot easier to encourage that engagement.
And I think Microsoft are really moving in that direction as well. Especially seeing your keynote this morning, it really feels like there's a lot of Lego blocks there, and you really can choose what the organisation needs, and it's not going to jar, it's not going to feel like, oh, you know, what's this interface we're working in? You know, the fact that you're talking about Loop, as I think I heard correctly, potentially a Teams app.
Yep.
It's all fitting together very neatly, isn't it? So is this a very deliberate design decision?
Yeah, we've, Lego's a good analogy. We want people to have the building blocks so they can assemble what they need, but if they have the whole solution, it all fits together. But sometimes, when we share our updates, like in a keynote, often the first reaction I get is it feels a little overwhelming. That they, it's almost like they feel responsible to go use it all tomorrow. And that's not the mindset. The mindset is more, look, over the course of your organization's evolution, you are going to need many of these tools, from OKRs to security and compliance offerings. Maybe not all at once every day, but you can hopefully trust us that we have architected these things in a way that's reasonably seamless. Wherever you get started is fine. And the other thing is, technology is not static. We're not perfect. We may get some feedback, and part of why I'm excited about being part of this panel is, not just what's working, but where could it be better? So sometimes we'll hear at conferences like this, hey, this Lego block and this Lego block could work better than they do today, and that's okay too. We'd love to hear that feedback. But I do think we've got a pretty comprehensive portfolio that fits together very well.
I really agree with that. And Richard, it would be great to hear from you on which tips you might give a fellow CIO who's about to embark on their digital transformation journey. I mean, we know there are lots of them out there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, and the first thing I always talk about, is time to value. That is the most important thing. We used to talk about deliver, but time to value is absolutely where it's at. So what you really need to do is to access the technology to solve the problem and just get it out there quickly. So that's all about being agile. But if I also take a step back, then it's also about being very clear, which I am, that there's no such thing as a IT problem solution, right? There's nothing other than business problems to be solved. So that's the starting point. And I think with the intranet cases we've just been talking about, what worked particularly well initially with Wincanton was a success definition, which is all about the business analysis, about understanding what the business really wanted, and that was done by yourselves, so effectively kind of third party, and then replaying back into senior management, so they kind of got an opportunity to challenge and understand that. And then that was held up there in lights as a target we were aiming for. And then of course in that delivery piece, it's also making people's lives easier as you go. So the adoption rate is where you need it to be, and indeed is far quicker. So it may sound I talked a little bit waterfall there in terms of the definition, but actually it's all about agile and delivering value.
Well, I mean, I love that the technology allows us now to have that business value-led conversation. So the success definition that Richard's just talking about, at AddIn365 we meet the CEO in the top table of every organisation we work with. That's right, every single one, even the really big ones you can see on our website. And it's really interesting because the CEO has asked them all to deliver on a different set of goals. And so we can come in behind that and say, great, well, we can meet your goals with Viva Learning, with a SharePoint new employee onboarding site, some Viva Connections dashboard tiles to support your new employees in their first week. We can go to the next member of the leadership team and talk to them perhaps about syntax and the need to organise their operational content well. And so I think I horrified Mark Cashman yesterday.
Oh no.
Because I ran into him here where we were setting up. And I said, it's so great to have all these tools. We now work to a 7-year client journey. And he was like, what do you mean 7 years? And I said, well, by the time you've gone around the entire top table of a FTSE 100 company,
sure.
and you've heard everything they need to do, and you've aligned the correct products to it, it's not an overnight thing, but the brilliance is that there is an answer for the thing that they're trying to do, and it then becomes, to your point, Richard, about prioritising against those in terms of what you're going to deliver and when, and you make your decisions about what might be foundational and address multiple needs. And of course, the intranet is the one that comes to mind for almost everybody. And then how do you build on that to deliver more value?
Yeah, no, I don't. A lot of people sort of think waterfall is a terrible word, and we should not have a plan, and we should just be agile. And I think there's this balance of, you do need a strategy and a multi-year vision. It is important that it be driven by real business needs, and it's durable, and you get feedback from a lot of stakeholders. But that's not contradictory with what is of that strategy, what is the most urgent things that can impact the business now and can be done now, and let's go do them right away. One, to realize value, but the second, to build credibility and build a feedback loop for those larger sets of investments that happen over time. Those two things are not contradictory. They actually reinforce each other much better than let's have a 5-year plan and have no value show up until year 5.
Yeah, no, well put, and very much in that space. And indeed, we do have a number of projects which suit waterfall methodologies as well as agile as well. So it's finding the sweet spot.
Absolutely. And so we've talked about time to value and what value might be for a business. I think we do need to address the current economic climate, which is not looking brilliant anywhere in the world. What have we got in the Microsoft kit bag that can support an organisation through these more difficult times?
Yeah, no, it's very clear. I learn this every day from our own CFO, Amy Hood, who not only represents Microsoft's point of view, but the perspective of other CFOs she talks to. And the benefits of employee engagement and collaboration are real. People do want to invest in those, but they need to see a more tangible economic payoff that sort of goes along for the ride to pay for it, if you will, because asking for more budget all the time is hard. And so part of what we do, part of the message I shared in the keynote is that, we think we have a great deal in Microsoft 365. If you had to assemble all these other components from a bunch of independent solutions, you'd spend almost twice as much money. And so some companies are looking at their technology spend and able to rationalize it and do more with less. The other is they look at specific modules. You and I were talking a couple days ago about even something new like Viva Sales. There's a very clear ROI that hopefully it can be measured in sales productivity. The revenues per salesperson in the next 3, 6, 12 months should grow because of that investment, as that is a very clear payoff. Similarly, even Viva Connections, onboarding of frontline workers. If we can help people be more productive in less time, that can be measured. So both the licensing and management, but also the tangible cost savings and revenue generation of companies.
I mean, I think to Richard's point about that success definition exercise, the big change I foresee is that prioritization amongst the C-suite of what are we going to tackle first, that's going to lean much more heavily now on the revenue driving and efficiency driving modules or workloads, more than perhaps some of the softer, still needed, but certainly less directly impacting revenues. And Richard, what's your view on the recession? Obviously, CIO, you've dealt with this before in 2008. What are some of the sort of guidance and thoughts that you've got around that?
No, for sure. I mean, so I've always worked in low margin businesses, where we may be making as many as 5 points, right, net points. So it's always tough, and a business case has always been there, and prioritization has always been there as well. So we've always been very, very careful about what we've done. Certainly 2008, yeah, that was an interesting time, as was the beginning of COVID as well. And actually, into credit to Microsoft, you're kind of really helpful on both occasions. But I think it does come back down to the kind of business cases and really making sure you're deploying technology where it's going to deliver a value, as opposed to it's nice to have. It makes things nice and hygienic, which are all good things to have right, but it really does come down to value. I think within the OS we are somewhat protected from the downturn, in that we're providing a national service primarily to government, but increasingly out to the commercial world as well. But it's really just a time lag. So increasingly we're looking at business cases as well in terms of where we're going to truly add value.
Yeah. And Andreea, what next for your agronomists? You've solved a lot of their pain around how they might get through the time-sensitive and enormous catalogue of content that you have. But of course, this isn't the end for your value proposition to them, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to look at building on the stack of technology that we already have in there. So probably one of the next steps is going to be integration of all the technology stacks, as well as potentially a CRM. But in the same time, we're going to start looking at external access to a subset of data to our customers. We're very R&D focused, so this might be something that will be very valuable to be able to showcase to our customers the results that we are bringing to them via that R&D value.
Thank you. And so thinking forward and the roadmap for Viva Connections looking into next year, you covered so much this morning in the keynote. What specifically is coming for Viva Connections next year?
Yeah, I think people have asked us for more flexibility. So I think about the ability to have multiple home sites for organizations that have a diverse set of users. People have asked us for updates of the design, various fit and finish things. Integration of the other Viva modules, as we've added all these other capabilities. People want to not just be able to click on an icon and launch an app, but see a card for their goals, their learning, and so forth. Continued focus on simplicity and performance. One companion product that we announced a little bit ago that'll come out next year for Viva Connections is Viva Amplify, where we started to hear people wanted almost the same kind of digital marketing inside their organization that their marketing groups used outside. They had email campaigns and social media campaigns, and they could target them and track them. And people said, could you give us the equivalent of that so that we could push out content to Viva Engage and Outlook and SharePoint, but without having to be a digital marketing guru with an expensive budget.
Campaign management.
And so I would say, that was an area that in the last 10 plus years at SharePoint, we're like, wow, I wonder if we'll ever get into that space. And the early work we did with Viva Connections caused customers to say, no, we need you into that space. So we're excited to have a good-sized team working on Viva Amplify.
And I really second that. Definitely check out Viva Amplify if you are an intranet stakeholder. Campaign management becomes the next thing people kind of think, wow, we need to do some work on this once that they've gone live, precisely because so much content today needs to be distributed through Viva Engage as well as through SharePoint. And other channels that an organisation might have. So do check out Viva Amplify if you haven't had a look at that already. And I suppose we'll close our lovely session this afternoon by asking you what you think your killer tip is for delivering a successful digital employee experience. If somebody was about to go off and to do it and they've never done it before, what's the one bit of advice you would give them?
I would say get the primary work group together and just have them write a 2-page document about what they're trying to get out of it. Don't take a year, don't make it 50 pages, don't just hire a partner or consultant to write it for you. Just take a few hours as a team to riff a little bit and write down 1 or 2 pages. Here are our business needs, here are our challenges we have, here's what we need to see in ROI. And you'd be amazed how clarifying that is if the team itself defines the needs they're trying to get out. And then you can use that for broader, bigger plans. But I would say that's the main thing, is have the work group come up with how they're going to work.
Yeah. So Jeff's hot tip is that age-old tip of be simple. So it's harder to be simple than it is to be complicated, right? So if it's 2 pages rather than 50, you're probably doing the right thing. How about you, Richard?
No, not dissimilar. I'd say, having once you've got those ideas, prototype it, get some wireframes, just bring it to life a little bit, so that group can really engage on it. Because the people I work with generally are not technologists, but if you can show them a picture of what this might do, then you're much more likely to get the follow through and the engagement.
So delivering a visual output that people can engage with. And Andreea?
Oh, trust the process. First of all, you're going to get there. It's going to shape up in the end and it's going to look brilliant. But also engage with your content owners very early in the process, as early as possible. If you have a multi-departmental organization, definitely bring your content owners on the journey from the very get-go.
I think that's key, isn't it? Because all of the Viva solutions are dependent on an ecosystem of content in one way or another to hydrate them. So making sure that content's in good shape, whether it's correct OKRs that have been agreed, or sales data in your CRM if you're looking at Viva Sales that's up to date, learning modules, knowing what it is you want your employees to engage with, that content, that knowledge of your content, making sure it's up to date is foundational. So thank you very much to my panel.
Thank you, Suzy.
And we hope you have a wonderful ESPC22. Thank you.